What's up, gentlemen? This is Rising Phoenix Podcast, a podcast about how to rise up after your divorce. I'm your host, divorce coach, Michael Rhodes. Let's get into it. Joining me today is Meehika. Meehika, let's just jump right into it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm a freelance journalist. I write for magazines like Vogue, Elle, and newspapers like The Guardian, Washington Post, etc. I cover culture, lifestyle, a lot of dating pieces, and yeah, that's me in a
Awesome.
brief.
Well, and the reason I reached out is I think you had written an article on narcissism, and I wanted to talk to you about that today. So let's start off like I'd like to do. Let's define things. What is narcissism? What is the definition of narcissism?
I mean, to be fair, it's so layered because a person can kind of have narcissistic traits and not be NPD, which is, like someone who has actual narcissistic personality disorder. So a lot of people, if you actually diagnose them, they will not qualify for NPD, but that doesn't really mean that they don't have traits that are narcissistic. It doesn't check all of the lists that is required to qualify someone as NPD. So I guess like that is also the first distinction. And there is no textbook kind of, I think, definition of a narcissistic person, but I would say someone who is very, like they can never be wrong, who thinks that it's always the other person that's wrong. Like they don't have the empathy. And this is what a lot of psychologists have said, even the ones I was talking to, that it's basically a lack of empathy in every situation. That is just the baseline of narcissism, just a very innate lack of empathy.
And do you think it's possible that someone can have some of the traits and not be a full-blown narcissist and that still be an issue? I mean, are there some aspects of having some narcissistic traits that are not terrible, or is it like if you have one of these traits, it's like you're probably really difficult to deal with? Do you think that there's layers or severities to this thing?
Yes. So when I did my piece, I was talking to a psychotherapist who works with like the topic, as when he teaches about narcissistic traits and just has a module on narcissism in the university he teaches. And there is healthy narcissism. So when you see entrepreneurs or you see really kind of larger than life influential people, they got there because there is healthy narcissism. And then there is just the very toxic kind of like lack of empathy, can't deal with narcissism. But now, as I said, the distinction is those kinds of people, some of them could be NPD, but some of them are just people with other issues who have a lot of narcissistic traits. So it's definitely very layered. And I guess like when I was researching a lot about this, my main concern was, oh my God, do I have any narcissistic traits?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because the more you study about it, the more it's like, oh my God, like, do I have any tendencies? And so the psychotherapist I was talking to was like, okay, this is what you just did there. A person who has narcissistic tendencies, a person who has NPD, will never even get to that point. They will never even say, do I have a problem? Am I the problem? For them, they are perfect. And how this word also came about is from the folklore. I don't know if you know about it. The so this was like, I don't know if it's in the Bible or in some sort of like text, whatever, but there was this person, and his name was Narcissus or Narciso, something like that. That's where the word comes from.
Okay.
This is like thousands of years back. And he used to look at the reflection of himself
Mm.
in the lake all the time, and kind of like, I genuinely don't know the exact lore,
Yeah.
but he used to look at the reflection and just kind of be like, who is this person? Why is he always here? I want to fight him and this and that. Why is he copying me? Everything I
Right.
do, he's just copying me, something like that. In the attempt to fight this person, he goes in the lake or something like that
Mm.
and drowns. So his narcissism basically killed him.
I got you.
Something like this. I don't
Yeah.
think I have the lore exactly correct, but if you Google it, it definitely has to do with a boy with the name Narcissus or something looking
Mm.
at himself in the reflection in the lake. So that's where it comes from,
Mm.
where you're so kind of everything is so about you that you destroy everything, you
Mm.
know?
Well, and so
So
maybe
yeah.
that's sort of the theme is a lack of consideration, because you mentioned a lack of empathy. So a lack of consideration and empathy for others means that you're focusing only on you. So maybe that's sort of where the distinction lies. Is, you know, I think you can look in a mirror and think fondly of yourself or actions that you take or whatever, but as long as you're able to be considerate or empathetic of others, then perhaps that means you aren't a narcissist.
Yeah. I think that ability to even ask yourself that question is in itself shows that you're not like narcissistic in a dangerous way, because an actual narcissist would not even have the empathy to ask that question.
So is this something that is innate? In other words, I mean, I know you know what innate means, but I'm a simple fellow. I got to explain things to myself. Is this something that's like you're born with it, or do you think it's developed due to childhood or whatever?
Honestly, there are so many different views on this. Some psychologists say that it is something you're born with, while others, like Dr. Ramani, who does a lot of stuff on narcissism, say it's about narcissistic parents creating narcissistic children. And that is kind of true as well, because I've seen it. My mother has a lot of narcissistic traits, and I kind of see where she gets it from, because my grandfather was like the emblem of, I guess, toxic masculinity and narcissistic, traits. So I can see that. But what other psychologists also say is that people with NPD basically have a cortex in their brain. I know we're born with three cortexes.
Hmm.
And so one of the cortex is kind of, it's supposed to be a certain kind of size. And in those people with NPD, that cortex is way shorter. And when it's shorter, that cortex is kind of responsible for empathy. And because they don't have that, they have less empathy for everything. They don't know
Hmm.
how empathy works. And it's really weird because, I mean, I love this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I've spoken to people who have kind of, and this also kind of goes into sociopathy and
Sure.
things like that. So I've spoken to people who have actually are diagnosed sociopaths, like actually diagnosed. And I always ask them, like, how does it feel? Like, what does it look like? And they have said this to me, that they genuinely try to mimic other people in kind of a group setting to know what the appropriate response is.
Hmm.
For example, the person I was talking to was giving me an example, saying that let's say we're all sitting in a group and someone got a phone call saying that, let's say someone died. He's like, I have to look around at everyone else to see how they're reacting and mimic that, because I don't know what the appropriate response is. to that. He's like, any situation, he doesn't have an empathy. And when I was having this conversation, I was like kind of giving him really worst case scenarios. I was like, okay, what happens when, let's say, tomorrow you get a call and maybe your parent has been in an accident? Let's just say, like, hypothetically, what is your response to that? And that person was telling me, well, my response is that, well, if they're in an accident, they're on the road. I'm sure there has been an ambulance that came, and I'm sure like someone
Wow.
helped them. There is literally nothing I can do. So me rushing to the
Yeah.
hospital isn't gonna make a difference. I am not a doctor, so I might just continue watching the Netflix movie I was watching.
Wow.
So exactly. So this is someone who's been diagnosed as like sociopath. It's just like they don't have the
Yeah.
empathy. And there are different ways like they can go to therapy and learn how to mimic empathy, but they just don't have it innate in them.
Mm.
But then again, of course, there are other psychologists like Dr. Ramani who have said that narcissism is created by, whether you've had a narcissistic sibling or a parent and something like that. Like it's just a chain that goes on. Narcissistic parent creates a narcissistic child. Um, and I can see that.
Yeah.
So there is no straight answer to this.
Yeah. Well, that's, it's always better if there is, but I think like many things in life, there never is a straight answer. But I do think that it makes me, funny enough, it makes me feel some sympathy for these folks if they don't have the capacity, like if they were born that way and their brain isn't lined up the way a normal brain is, whatever the hell that means, and they can't behave normally. There's a part of me that almost feels sad for them, and I wonder. And you kind of said like they go to therapy and they can learn to mimic, but I wonder if there is like if you really wanted to, but I guess that goes back to like if you want to be better, then you probably aren't narcissistic. So maybe I don't know. I'm just trying to sort of to wrap my head around it all and try and figure out like is this something that people can change? But I think you have to recognize that you need to change, and if you do that, you're probably not narcissistic. And B, even if you do somehow someone sits you down and says you need to change, but you don't have the capacity. It's just that's kind of sad in a lot of ways. Like there, no matter what, you're either so clueless that in a way that you're not going to get help, and even if you want it, you can't kind of get it anyway. I wonder what the success rate is, if there's any stats of like someone that is sort of forced to work on this, if they can learn to mimic it in a way, which is so crazy to me to think about, that they can be sort of successful in that. Like I'd be curious to. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I'd be curious to know if that data exists, or if that sort of scenario exists where someone is able to sort of change themselves in a way when they're not really, they don't have the capacity. I don't know. Sorry.
I mean,
Sidebar.
I've seen a lot of videos, though. I've seen a lot of videos where Dr. Ramani, who is like, she's got like PhD and she works with a lot of narcissists who come in and want to change. Sometimes there are very few. I mean, what she says is most of them, it doesn't last long. You can try, but there are like 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 cases where they're very committed to it.
Yeah.
And it's just that practice makes you perfect. So when you practice this every day and you're so committed to it, it becomes a lifestyle.
Yeah.
But it's like learning French, isn't it? Like, I mean, you can give up, or you can just be so committed to learning it, that it becomes a lifestyle. But I genuinely, this is so, I mean, nowadays there's so much content as well about like narcissistic parents. Um, and the more you look at it, the more I realize, especially because I see so many narcissistic tendencies in my mom, they kind of don't change.
Yeah.
but you just kind of need to sort of have the tools and the mechanisms of how to deal with it. But changing them or trying to get them to change is just such a lost hope and lost cause. Like that should never be the aim of dealing with anyone you think has narcissistic tendencies.
I wonder if we kind of talked about this, I think, during the pre-interview a while ago. I wonder if and I think it's true, if this word, this sort of diagnosis, is thrown around a lot nowadays, and it is, right? And I wonder how helpful and or harmful that is. Like, because I see it a lot I run a Facebook group. It's got 7,000 men in it at this point that are going through divorce or been through or whatever. And on occasion, that word narcissist gets thrown around like it's like everybody on the planet has or is a narcissist. I wonder how helpful and or hurtful that type of mentality is. And I think therapy speak, and you're starting to see some of these things that, I think are mainly positive, but could clearly be. You look at this Jonah Hill thing, and I'm not going to comment on whether or not I believe it or whatever. It is what it is. I'm not choosing sides here. Just saying there, you could see that people are sort of using this therapy speak stuff. I mean, shit, we're doing it here, really. And I wonder how helpful and or hurtful it is.
I mean, it's definitely there. It's so difficult because there really are people who have no idea about these words.
Yeah.
And for them, it's really helpful to educate themselves. Like I know people who've been with narcissists in relationships for like 5 years or a decade, and they had no idea about any of these terms, like narcissism and gaslighting and just all the glossary of terms. And I think with social media, it's coming to awareness now. Whereas earlier, these terms were only kind of like a secret code language that psychologists and therapists talked about.
Yeah.
It was not known to the general public.
Yeah.
But with that, obviously now everyone's self-diagnosing everyone else.
Yeah.
So if you have a bad date, you just label them as a narcissist,
right,
without any context. So that's definitely like, I don't think diagnosing anyone helps. And this is what I have spoken to, with therapists about. What do we do? It's mostly about how a person makes you feel. And narcissists will mostly make you feel a certain way, which is, putting you down to elevate themselves, making jokes at your expense, which is not funny, having no empathy for your, there are sort of like those check boxes. And when someone's making you feel like that, there is no point even trying to diagnose them. Just be like, okay, they have a few narcissistic tendencies that just make me feel constantly on edge, or whatever, and just maintain your distance and just kind of don't react, do not justify, don't explain anything to them. There's like a textbook guidance of how to deal with narcissistic people. Because the thing is, you can't avoid them. Even if you're not in a relationship with them, you might have a narcissistic boss or a coworker that you have to put up with.
Yeah.
So it's like there is no point diagnosing anyone. It's just you need to develop tools to know how to protect yourself and how to literally have the tools to deal with them, because it's a very textbook kind of, gray rocking those kinds of techniques.
Yeah. So, well, and to that point, we want to look at, like, how do you know if someone is if someone you're in a relationship with, how do you know if they are a narcissist? What are some of the telltale signs that they will, and again, not to necessarily diagnose, but just to understand what you're dealing with? What are some of those signs that you should look for?
The number one sign, which everyone kind of agrees on, this is just the only thing I feel like everyone in the narcissistic space, like all the experts, agree on, is the love bombing phase that starts, and it it's like it goes like this and then it dips down like that. So the first few weeks is like extreme affection, and this can kind of, it can be in the form of gifts, it can be in the form of literally someone telling you they love you on the third or the fourth date, things like that. Um, I mean, of course, there have been so many Netflix shows like the Tinder Swindler and, things like that about like if you want to actually see how it works. But it starts very good, like really good, and you're like, oh my God, this is a fairy tale, this is a dream, everything is like perfect. And then shit starts going down. But when shit starts going down in the same pace when it went like up, it's like they will give you small doses of that high that you used to get. So it's like a few weeks of like a really great high, and then it's just bad, but it's like it's like a drug, you
Mm,
know. So you get withdrawal symptoms, but then you just get a little bit of a hit,
mm,
and then you're like, oh, it's the same high. It's actually not the same high. And then this cycle continues and can continue for years. But also like there is gaslighting, which is like invalidating everything you're saying, your reality. If you get into any conflict, it's like the narcissist is like, it's not me, all of it's you. Like this is all you, this is your doing.
yeah.
So every conversation happens like that. And this is not even just in a relationship context, but even like if you have a narcissistic parent or if you have a narcissistic sibling, if you look at every single time you've had any conflict, I mean, literally every time I address something with my mom, I realize I have spent 3 hours sitting down or sometimes more addressing every single thing, and she has either a justification or she blames it onto me. You were too difficult as a child. I had to discipline you, this and that, or it is something or the other. It's everything else but not her.
Yeah.
It's like there is no accountability. There is no concept of accountability. So, like it's just like if you and me are having a conversation or a conflict and you say that, okay, you did this and this hurt me, I will be okay, of course, it's human nature to be defensive, and I'll be
Sure.
like, okay, maybe I did this because XYZ, but I am really sorry. I
Yeah.
did not know, but with narcissists, it just doesn't exist. There is no owning up, there is no apology, there is no kind of like, it's just deflecting as wherever they can deflect. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
You think it's I mean, obviously it's the lack of empathy and stuff, but like I wonder if it's the inability to be accountable. I wonder if that's also like a brain function where they can't, or if it's so scary to them to take accountability, like because then that would mean like there's something wrong with them or whatever, or it taps into what they were. Because I think if you were raised by a narcissistic parent, you probably would have to have some pretty crappy feelings about yourself, like deep down, like root stuff, right? The beginnings, right? And so I wonder if that means then you don't take accountability, so you don't look at yourself, and so then you don't feel all those negative emotions, negative things that were sort of put on you by a parent. I wonder. So I guess my question is, or my wondering out loud, it's not really a question, is I wonder if it's something that is a brain thing where they can't sort of take accountability, or if they're just so unable to look at themselves because what they see is really, really ugly.
I think they're so conscious of their image
Hmm.
that nothing they think they can do can ever be wrong, because that would qualify them as like humans, or but they have this very ideal, perfect versions of themselves. And so a lot of the times you would also see where narcissists are, and this is something Dr. Ramani talks about a lot. They are the most charming people in a room full of people all the time. So if
Yeah.
you have a partner, or if you have a mother or a sister, and you're telling your friend that this person is so narcissistic and blah, 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 and then they meet them in a party or something, they're like, oh my God, your partner or your sister or your mom is so lovely, is so amazing, because they are the life of the party. They're so conscious and so amazing, at pleasing everyone else and kind of like maintaining that image. So when you address something, that image kind of shatters, and they're like, oh no, now I made a mistake, or I'm human, and that just I don't they just have a very ideal vision of themselves. They can do no wrong.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's because they do feel deep down so bad about themselves that they have to prop themselves up in this way and sort of put on this facade. I mean, and again, when we think about these things, and anytime I interview anyone about anything, I'm always like playing myself against what's being said, and you were kind of talking about it earlier, like, am I a narcissist? And I'm sitting here thinking all these things, like, shit, I do some of this stuff, or I do some of that stuff, or whatever. And I don't know that means that I must not be, but I probably have some traits, like, and I think it's sort of it's a weird fine line, I think, where you want to be confident, you want to be self-assured,
Yeah,
but I guess you can't take it too far, but I guess, again, if you're even conscious of it, like, I don't think about it on a day-to-day basis, like, am I behaving like a narcissist? But when I do this sort of interview and I'm thinking about, well, man, I did some shitty things throughout my time, for sure, and there were times where I wouldn't take blame. I'm sure of it. I'm almost positive, but
yeah,
then there are times when I don't know. I guess if I'm asking these questions of myself, I'm probably okay. But I think, like you were
yeah,
saying earlier, like, somebody like Elon Musk is probably maybe not a full-blown narcissist, but clearly the guy likes himself. And so, but is that a bad thing? And I myself, sitting here just thinking about these things, I struggle with it, which I guess means that I'm not, but that doesn't mean that I don't perhaps sometimes behave poorly. I'm sure I do that for sure, probably once a day, I would imagine. But anyway, so I guess I'm just sort of thinking out loud about sort of my experience, because I was called one, and so that makes me go, well, am I? Maybe I am, because when you go through the divorce process, at least in a lot of the cases I see, this is anecdotal. I don't have any studies, but when someone's leaving you, they label you as a very bad person, narcissist, borderline personality disorder. I got all the negative stuff that you know she could think of, and they do that. And I understand the mechanism. They do this because they have to, right? You're not going to leave someone and be like, oh, he is just the best person ever. Like, if you're not leaving after saying those things, right?
yeah.
And so in order to sort of give yourself some fuel, you're gonna you're gonna find all the negatives, and I get that. But as someone that was called a narcissist, it's I look at it and go, well, you know maybe I am, maybe I have these traits, but I guess you can have some of the traits and not be a full-blown narcissist, right?
What I've actually learned from my other friends, I mean, one of my friends, she's the one who introduced me to this whole plethora of narcissism talk, is because she had I mean, she has a narcissistic mother, and
Mm,
she always chose narcissistic partners, which is
mm,
kind of true for myself as well. And so the more I was talking to her about my dating life, and the more she directed me to all of these people, experts, Dr. Ramani, this and that. But I had the same conundrum as you do. And I was like, am I narcissist? Because he called me one. He literally called me one.
right.
And she was like, that is a textbook narcissism 101 thing they do. because deep down they know that they have the traits.
Mm,
They will call you one. This is like mirroring.
mm.
So, you hold a mirror to exactly what they're doing. And it's like, she's like, all of my partners who were like completely narcissistic called me one. So she was like, this is textbook like, and this was something Dr. Ramani talks about as well. Um, because yeah, it's basically using therapy talk now
Yeah,
to just say that you're the problem.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, so that's very textbook kind of a
yeah.
narcissistic person calling you narcissistic.
And I wonder, like, some of the people that sort of, because I see it on occasion. I don't know the frequency, but guys in the group will be like, "Oh, she was absolutely a narcissist," and there was a part of me going, "I wonder if he's really the narcissist here," because I mean, there are certain guys who post constantly about it. All they post is about narcissism and how to look out for it, and I'm thinking, gosh, I wonder if this guy is really the narcissist. I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to diagnose anyone, but I always often wonder, like, the
Yeah,
person that's screaming the loudest about it, I wonder if it's actually, like you said, sort of mirroring, like, or projecting, or whatever you want to
yeah.
call it. So if you find yourself in a relationship with one, how do you get out of that with minimal damage? What's the best way to sort of extract from a toxic relationship and especially one with a narcissist?
I guess it's like it doesn't happen overnight because they're gonna make it really difficult for you. And this is the thing. This is why people find themselves with a narcissist for like 5 years, 10 years, because they make it impossibly difficult. So you need to have an exit strategy, and you have to kind of do it in, kind of like stages. So you start gray rocking them a little bit. Um, it's it's really hard, but they will, because even after you have actually gotten out of it, or even when you're in the process, they will try to hoover you. And hoovering is another term which narcissists do. It's like hoovering the victim back in
Yeah.
with that exact same kind of like dose, giving them that high. It's like how people, don't who are addicted to drugs don't leave it for years and years and years. It takes them ages to get clean. It's the same thing. It gives you the same hit. So the narcissist is gonna kind of do everything. And now this is why it's a bit tricky, because there are so many different kinds of narcissists out there, or like people with narcissistic tendencies. You've got like the covert narcissist, you have got the raging, like ultra, whatever, masculine, or
Right.
just the raging narcissist. There are very different kinds of them. And I remember one of my friends, she was in the cycle for, I guess, like 3 years, 3 or 4 years. Every single time she got the courage to leave, and she's like, this is it, I'm leaving. Um, he would say everything that she wanted to hear. Like, she wanted to move in with a boyfriend really badly. She wanted to probably get married to someone.
Sure.
So he knew exactly what she wanted. So he would hoover her back in with these words saying, I want to live with you, like, we can just move in together and this and that. Like, literally when she's leaving, he
Mm.
would say these things just to hoover her back in. Like, we can start looking at places and this and that from next month on, blah blah. And then she would go back to the relationship. All of that's gone in literally, like, it lasts a few days, not even a week. And it's back. It's
Yeah.
back to how it was. And I think she repeated the cycle every 2 or 3 months until one day she was like, this is it. The whole thing took 3 years. I guess she was with him for like 1 year, and 3 years was trying to break up with him. So
Wow.
I mean, it's really important, and this is why I say, like, obviously, this is important to educate yourself about these terms, like what's hoovering, what do they do,
Yeah.
things like that, because you will need to know what's happening, and when you're in the middle of it, it's really hard. Because even when I was with a guy who was like, I mean, I can't obviously diagnose him as NPD, but I'm pretty sure he clearly had like most of the narcissistic tendencies to qualify as one. But it was the same thing. The entire relationship, the first half was great, whatever, not even first half, like one third of the first, whatever. And the rest of it was just constant shittiness that he would just give me doses of that high I initially got. And that is usually enough. Because when I was talking to a psychotherapist about this, like what is this? Why do people stay in this? Why did I stay in this? He was giving me an example of, I don't know if you've heard of that study that's conducted with rats, where if it's like positive reinforcement, like when you feed a rat food in, like, you don't know when there is no like schedule. It's not like it's every day at 1 p.m. or it's every day. There is no schedule. So the rat actually doesn't know when you're going to feed him next. So it's like they would do everything to please you all the time, not knowing when the next dose is coming. So it's similar to that. Like you will go through a long period of shittiness because you don't know when that next fix is coming. And when they give you that very small dose of it, you're happy for a long time or whatever. And then again, the relationship is shit, but you stay.
Yeah.
It's just the same. It elicits the same hormones in us as humans as it does in that rat. Um, and the same ideology is also used when you're trying to train a puppy. When the puppy does something good, you treat the puppy, right?
Sure.
That's positive enforcement.
Yeah.
But with, now the puppy knows if he's going to do something good, you're going to treat him. So now he's going to behave. He's going to pee where you asked him to pee. He's going to, but with humans, and that's what the experiment was, like you don't know when that, fix is coming. So you're always waiting for it and kind of, on your toes, trying to please the narcissist. Narcissist is never impressed. And then every now and then you'll get that fix. And this also it's the same dynamic with like children dealing with narcissistic parents. It's like you will spend your entire life trying to please that parent, but they will never. You think the bar is here and you achieve it, and the next thing you know, the bar is here again. You achieve it, and the next thing you know, the bar is there. A very good example of it is Succession. It's a very raging narcissistic parent. I don't know if you've seen Succession. Have you? The TV series?
Only a few episodes.
Yeah, so it's literally a narcissistic parent dangling a carrot in front of all of his three children, and every time they achieve it or one of them does, he's like, yeah, whatever, blah.
Right.
Just like it's a higher bar. So it's that kind of like, they're never pleased with you, but at the same time they don't want to let you go. They just want to like play with you, kind of. I don't know. It's very twisted.
Well, I think when I hear things like that, sometimes, and I don't know what this says about me, but sometimes I think, regardless of what a person does or how they behave, and I get this is easier said than done and all that, but to me, you should have enough self-worth. And I'm not saying I'm there either, but you should have enough self-worth. And I'm not trying to put it on the person. I mean, but if you're not being treated well, walk away, right? If you have an innate sense of like confidence, and I know that's tough for everybody, but sometimes when I hear these things, I'm like, well, why? And I'm not trying to call anyone out, and I'm not trying to blame the victim. I am not, but if you can't walk away from something that's clearly not healthy, but maybe you don't realize that it's not healthy. I don't know. To me, there's a part of me that says, because I see this all the time. Guys are like, oh, she was a narcissist and she did all these things, and I'm like, well, but you tolerated that. Like, and again, I'm not. Maybe it sounds like victim blaming. I'm not trying to, but there's a part of me that says, if you did work on yourself, then you would be able to walk away from something. And I'm not saying domestic violence and that kind of stuff. That's a whole other conversation, and that's not what I'm talking about. But there's a part of me that when we talk about accountability, right, it's hard for me not to think that a person that tolerates nonsense or whatever, I don't think, I mean, I'm not trying to blame them. It probably sounds like that, but I'm really not. But I think if you tolerate some BS, whatever that means, then you need to figure out how to not, right? I mean, isn't there some accountability there as well?
And to be honest, the main reason for that is a lot of these people, and that's true for what happened with me as well, had either a narcissistic parent or a sibling all their life
So it's
throughout their childhood. So that treatment is normalized. So you think that is normal,
so
which it's not.
Right. You don't know any better.
So you don't know it's not normal. I did not know this until my friend, who had a history of, now she's obviously married, to who she's married for like over a decade, but she has a narcissistic mother and she had a history of dating narcissistic people. And then she saw me doing it. And then the more I started talking about my mother, she was like, you're doing exactly what I did 20 years ago. And that opened up an entire plethora of like, oh my God, like, even if I'm not saying all of my exes were NPD or something, but 80% of them had very high narcissistic tendencies. And the thing is, these, like, I choose them and they choose me. So people with narcissistic tendencies literally choose a particular type of victim. So now if like I come across, because now I know better, a narcissistic person cannot choose me now because it's like it won't work. Like literally I can spot it. So the dynamic will not work. But earlier I was the perfect victim, and I was also searching for the same thing. I always, like, because that treatment was so normalized for me that none of the other guys who showed me otherwise and like who were nice, they didn't stand a chance with me. I wasn't with them. Like, I mean, I would be with them and then I would break up with them because that was just completely not normal to me.
So it speaks to a feeling or a thought or an idea I have. Everybody should be in therapy. And I know there aren't enough therapists to go around, but we all need work. And you're right. I guess I didn't think of it in that way, and that that was normal. That's what you knew. And I guess in some ways, if I hadn't been in therapy and hadn't done any kind of work, and I really only got into therapy because my father died when I was 22, and that really rocked my world. So I was able to examine myself and look at myself. And I have a lot of work to do. I'm a fucked up individual, but I think if you've never been in that space of sort of like working on yourself, that maybe you wouldn't realize, or with an unbiased third party or whatever to sort of help you see some of these things, then maybe you never would, because you're right. It's natural. It's normal. This is the way your mother treated you. So it's going to feel familiar and like, and normal. I suppose I didn't think of that. Well, listen, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. The last question that I ask everybody is, what words of wisdom would you impart to a man just starting his divorce process?
Just starting, as in, they've just like, have they left the person? Have they come to that decision?
Yeah,
have they served the papers?
They're very all of the above. I think probably the big one, I think, is she has either served the papers or she's left or you've left, whatever the scenario is, but you're clearly separated.
Well, I think there is no point kind of trying to blame who was wrong, but
Yeah.
also kind of see that what you could have done and what led to this, just kind of like, I guess, introspect.
Yeah.
I see a lot of men who immediately get into like new relationships and or are like immediately getting engaged and things like that. And I think that is really scary because then you're just trauma bonding. You haven't really dealt with all of the trauma and you're just like, looking for a quick fix,
Yeah.
instant validation. And also another thing I see a lot of couples who recently divorced is that they see it as a competition, as in who gets a better looking partner soon.
Right.
So that is like the ultimate game that, oh my God, I cannot let my ex win. So I have got to find a new partner, a good looking one, post them on my social media.
Yeah.
And a lot of people also do it because they want to show to their friends or their mutuals that I am not the problem. Look, I got a
Right.
new shiny
Yes.
person in an instant. They are the problem, but you're actually kind of not portraying that. It's just the fact that you've taken no time to reflect and just replace this person quickly is just you kind of are showing that you are the problem.
Agreed.
Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, honestly, like there is no point trying to find blame. There is no point trying to find another person to show the world something else. I guess just take time to reflect and make sure that you learn from it and then you don't repeat it because you don't want to be a person who's been divorced 2 or 3 times. And that's the thing. Like if you keep repeating the pattern, you're just going to end up um being that person who's been divorced three
Mhm.
times,
Yeah. I
and
know.
that works for celebrities. It does, but it doesn't work for normal humans.
No, I can't. I don't know who could afford that shit. It's expensive to be honest with you, but yeah, I agree. I mean, I try to preach it all the time. It's take time, at least a year. And some people like everyone's different. Yeah, but you're not gonna die if you spend a year alone. I think honestly,
Yeah,
it can take a lot longer. I think it does, but a year at least, for
yeah,
goodness gracious sakes. I think I'm coming
definitely.
up on year 4. Actually, 2 days will be 4 years since she left, and I still have work to do and still have struggles, and it's compounded, I think, because we have kids, and so I have to deal with her,
Yeah,
and so it makes sort of a clean break is not possible, and so then I think then that delays the healing because you still have to see and interact, and it's a lot easier if it's out of sight, out of mind. That's a very true thing.
yeah,
um but when you have to deal with them, especially if you have to go to court or all these things, it allows the wound, I think, to never really truly, I wouldn't say truly heal, but it takes longer, because keeps getting poked, again, if you were the one that was left
yeah.
and didn't make the decision. So I agree wholeheartedly. You got to take the time to heal, to work on yourself, to reflect. So thank you so much for doing this. What's the best way people can find you? How do they get in touch with you and your work and the things that you do and the articles you write? What's the best way to find your stuff?
My social media handle is Meehika Barua. That's Meehika Barua. That's the same for Instagram as well as Twitter. And I post all of the articles I write. So yeah, it should be on my social media.
Awesome. I'll make sure to put it in the show notes. Thanks again so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for watching and or listening. Since my separation in July of 2019, I have done an incredible amount of work on myself. I've had many different therapists, life coaches, and went through different programs. I've taken all that I've learned and put it into my own program called Forged by Fire. If you are interested in having me help you navigate your divorce, please hit my website, risingphoenixdivorcecoach.com. I look forward to working with you.